is I prepared a brief presentation on the six-step process. So what you're going to see here is kind of a whirlwind tour of the six-step process, the 6-week study course that Craig talked about. Is maximizing your career in the new world of work. Okay? I'd like to read what the founder of Crossroads has said here, and then quote a piece of scripture that is foundational in this ministry. Crossroads Career Network, for those of you that don't know, is a national ministry of which Elmbrook is a member church. There are over 100 member churches throughout the country. We are one of those member churches that is able to utilize the resources and provide this service to people in our community, in our church family, and in a broader sense. What he says is, you are an incredible, one-of-a-kind person made by God for good works that he's prepared for you. This is your invitation to maximize your career by hearing and following God's call. And the foundational charter scripture that we've used in this ministry comes out of Jeremiah 6:16. It says, "Thus says the Lord, stand at the crossroads and look, ask where the good way is and walk in it." And when I was preparing this talk, I was curious as to, well, what does crossroads mean? So I looked in the dictionary, and I got the actual, Webster's dictionary version of what this word means. Crossroads simply is a point at which a choice or a decision must be made. So it's kind of interesting that we've chosen Crossroads as the name of the ministry, as the purpose of what we're trying to do here to find our way in finding what God's calling for us is in the world of work. A little bit. Can't see my notes. It's the first sign of getting old, I know. I really have trouble. My wife says I'm already making those faces like I can't see. So you'll see that on this first slide, that piece of scripture there is noted, and that's important. So when we're at a crossroads, we're at a point where we need to make a decision. Now, we could be unemployed, we could be misemployed, underemployed, miserably employed. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's the point at which we need to make a decision. Talk a little bit about the new world of work. The volunteer chairman of Crossroads wrote a book recently. His name is Peter Bork. He wrote this book here called A Better Way to Make a Living and a Life, Thriving in the New World of Work. He talks in this book a lot about how the world of work has changed here in just the past several years, but definitely over the last decade or two. Some of the old rules that people are accustomed to are more maternalistic companies, employment for life, paid benefits, full-time workforce. All the functions were in-house. There's no outsourcing of things like that. A big company equated to stability. You could retire at 62. Some of the new rules, contrasting what I just said there is no maternalistic instinct anymore. There's layoffs all the time, as many of you have probably experienced firsthand. The economy downturning in 08 and 09, many companies were forced to do that, and many companies exercise that option of employment at will in a state such as Wisconsin fairly regularly. You don't have employment for life. Right now, it's estimated that a person just starting in the world of work, coming out of college right now, will experience 13 different jobs in their career over that period of work before they actually retire. And that's probably only going to go up. So what used to be one of those red flags during an interview where people were considered job hopping every 2 or 3 years, now that is more of the norm. That is more of what people see. There is no pension. It's on your own. You contribute to your own 401k, your own retirement plan. Some employers contribute to that type of thing, but there is no paid benefits or pensions that you find anymore. A lot of companies use part-time workforces, contractors, things of that nature. It's not always just a full-time workforce. Outsourcing is prevalent. Sometimes now small equals more stable rather than the big, large companies. And kind of finally, people are not retiring. People, because of the nature of the economy and because of the way retirement is viewed nowadays, people continue to work. My dad is 75 years old and he still works. And he retired 15 years ago. He had an early retirement package from a company he worked at for 41 years, but he's worked more now since he retired than he did when he was working. But it's things that he's enjoying to do, things that he has chosen to do, rather than the job that he worked at for 41 years. So the concept of retirement is changing as we speak. So this kind of change in the world of work is something you need to consider as you're approaching this crossroads or this change in your career, because things are different than they used to be. Your current work situation, as we talked about, what is your current work situation? Are you unemployed? Are you misemployed? Miserable? Nervous? There's a lot of these people. I read a study that was just put out earlier this year by Right Management, and it said 84% of the current workforce was unhappy in their current position. And when you factor in that's a huge amount of people. It's a huge amount of people that are out there that are at a miserable point in their career or would be actively looking to find something else. And you have to wonder, well, what is it? What is it people are looking for? And that's what we'll kind of talk about here as we walk through these 6 steps. Ultimately, you want to progress through this and feel fulfilled and called. You may be happily employed, but something's missing. Something's not there that you need or that you feel called to be doing. So we can be anywhere on this spectrum, but you have to understand really where you're at first. There's a piece of scripture that I always think of as I go through this job search process, or as I review my current situation. It's out of Colossians, and some of you are familiar with it, 3:23 and 24. So whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It's the Lord Christ you are serving. And for me, that's always been a very big comfort for me in approaching my job, whether I'm currently employed, in whatever state that might be, miserable or otherwise. Am I approaching my job the right way? Am I approaching it as from the viewpoint of who I'm really serving? It's not the guy down in the corner office. Yeah, he's my boss, and he's the guy I have to be accountable to here in this job. But am I doing my work to the glory of God every day? Am I doing it in a way that honors God? That's the way you have to approach it, from my viewpoint anyway. And it always gives me a certain level of comfort, no matter what the situation might be. Walking through a job search does cost. Okay, there's some investment that needs to be made. There's time, money, and effort that's going to be required. How much time are you going to spend on this? If you're unemployed, this ought to be your job. Finding a job ought to be your job. You ought to be spending at least as much time as you would on the job searching for a job if you're unemployed. When you're employed, like I was here recently, when I found a job, you have to find that time. You have to make that effort. You have to find accountability partners. Larry over here was my accountability partner. We met several times, talked about what I'm doing, how I'm making time, asking me, did you do what you said you were going to do? You have to do that. Otherwise, it's too easy after a 40, 50-hour work week to just say, I don't have time to do it. I can't do it. If you're in a job search mode, whichever mode you may be in your work situation, you have to make that time, and you have to be accountable to someone. It's too easy not to do the things. How much money will you invest? Well, it depends on the type of job that you're approaching. Do you need further schooling? Do you need, a new wardrobe, new clothes? Are there investments in the resources that you're going to provide in resumes and business cards, things of that nature? You have to look at it from that viewpoint, as this is an investment in me looking for the next opportunity that God put in front of me. So the interesting thing here, or the notable thing that I'll tell you right now is that all this information that you're going to see is available to you right now. This is our book. This is the 80-page resource guide workbook that people who go through this class get. It's downloadable on crossroadscareer.org. All you have to do is log onto that website, click on the PDF file, and you can print it off. And you can go through it. There's a lot of good tools here, and what we're going to do is cover some of these right now as we start to go through the 6 steps. But what I recommend, I highly recommend, while you can do this on your own, and there's a lot of good tools and so forth, it's much more effective and beneficial if you go through it with a group. There's a lot of benefit to discussing these things, talking about these concerns. What are your fears? What are your barriers that are preventing you from approaching that next? I see Craig nodding. Barriers. The barrier exercise is a great exercise to identify what is it that's preventing you from doing what you really want to do, and looking at those things. So all of this is in this guide here. There are maximizing your career. There's hearing and following God's calling. The ministry has identified several different things which I find very, very useful in approaching a job search. From a more spiritual standpoint, there's 11 different actions that have helped people in hearing and following God's calling. I'm just going to list them off here. Worship, attending worship, reading and studying the Bible, praying, listening to God. I love that Psalm 46:10 verse, be still and know that I am God. Sometimes we're too busy talking and asking, and then we fail to stop and listen to hear what it is God's placing on our heart. What do we need to be doing? Is He calling us to do something that is totally out of our comfort zone? That's something that we need to consider. Be with other Christians. Be in a study group, be in an accountability group, so that they can hold you accountable for this. Seek counsel. Listen. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance out of Proverbs. Consider unfolding circumstances. You have to consider each situation that you might be in a different manner. Confess and clear your head. Be alert for God's peace. Keep a journal. That's something I don't do, but people who do it have said that it's very, very effective. A lot of times it helps you slow down and really take note of what's happened in your life or what direction you're heading. And finally, just trust and obey. Trust and obey God. That's what we're commanded to do. Obviously, we just talked about the workbook. That's what we're going to go through right now. The 6 steps, without any further ado, are these. What I've given you is a handout. If you could look at that just briefly. Again, this worksheet is a worksheet that you can find on the crossroadscareer.org website. Do you see this worksheet right here? On it is a copy of the diagram that you see up here on the screen. The 6-step process, as well as working through those 6 steps. Okay? The 6 steps are: step 1, attitude. Okay? Attitude, reach forward to what lies ahead. And we'll dig into each one of these in just a minute. Step 2 is aptitude. Discover and develop your strengths. Step 3 is altitude. Looking at target opportunities in your resume. Those first 3 steps, there's some alliteration there. They all start with A. The second ones all start with S. But the A is the step 1. 2 and 3, attitude, aptitude, altitude. That's called planning the work. Okay, so you're looking at, what am I doing? You're laying the groundwork. You're doing a lot of introspective work. You're not just going out there throwing resumes out, applying to jobs. You're actually doing some introspective work in your own self, okay? And I like to say that step 2, the aptitude step, is a lot of what is unpacked in those 4 weeks of real success hearing and following God's calling. It's really looking at how has God called you, how has He put you together, what are your passions and talents and things of that nature. After you get to altitude, then we start working the plan. That's the second 3 steps. Searching, finding jobs, careers, calling, sorting, wowing your interviewers and employers. Okay, you're sorting through all those opportunities. Then finally, step 6, selecting, walking in the work that's made for you. So the first 3 steps are planning the work. The second 3 steps are working the plan. So let's look at first step, very important step, attitude. Any idea why attitude's the first step in this process? Attitude has a huge impact, and as many of you are probably well aware, attitude is easily conveyed in almost everything you do. I like the little attitudal-meter right there, from joy on the top to the pit on the bottom. You know, and this is where you have to start. And that's what I like about this program so much, is it starts with this, because you have to understand where you're at right now, because it's going to be conveyed through whatever you do, from interviews to networking to discussing your previous employment or your star stories. Your attitude has to be in a correct mindset, okay? One thing that we talk about in this class is difference between your attitude and your circumstances, okay? Here's a question for you. It's a kind of a rhetorical question. It's a thinking question. There's no real answer. You have to come up with it yourself. But is it possible to be in the pit circumstantially? So you're way down here, your circumstances. I'm unemployed. I've been unemployed for 2 years. I can't find a job. I know an individual who's in our class who did everything right. He just couldn't get any bites. He couldn't get any jobs. And he was in the pit circumstantially. But is it possible to be in the pit circumstantially, yet live each day with a positive attitude of joy, to be on the other end of the spectrum? Is it possible to do that? I submit to you it is. Okay? I mean, that's where do you find your joy? Is it in your job? Is it in what you do every day? Or is it in the fact that you have a relationship with Jesus Christ and you know where you're going? You know who you're serving. You know that He's going to be the ultimate provider in what you do. And I refer to James 1, verses 2 through 4 says, "Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." You know, so there's the example of how you can live in joy, but circumstantially be in the pits. Okay, and what you have to do there is kind of forget what lies behind. Consider it all joy. Forgiveness dissolves the anger. Okay, many people come out of a work situation and they're angry. They feel slighted. They feel, the situation that I just left was one of those kind of situations where I could have easily approached it from a very poor attitude. For whatever reason, I was targeted, and my time at that company was going to be limited, whether it was my decision or not. And there were some nasty things going on there, and yet I had to approach it from a point of joy, not because my circumstances were joyful, but because I, had security in my ultimate joy. And so that's the situation that we all have to face. We have to reach forward with what lies ahead. okay? So you're both in depth and breadth. We make decisions now for the better that will last forever. If this life is a journey, are you headed in the right direction? Okay. In the breadth of what lies ahead, we consider the number of opportunities that are out there. In our most current writing of this, there's more than 1,000 different types of industries out there, each with thousands of employers. There's over 30,000 occupations with millions of workers that exist right now. When you think of those numbers, the breadth of what's out there is just staggering. It's amazing, and it ought to give you some joy to look at that and say, there's something that really lies ahead. Press on towards the goal of the upward call from God. There we're dealing with your physical well-being, okay? Going through a crossroads is difficult. Physically, emotionally, there's things that you need to consider. You need to eat right, exercise, get plenty of rest. And this, again, all goes back to the attitude that you're approaching this with. How are you dealing with it? Physically, mentally, and spiritually, are you approaching this? If there's stressors in your life, especially during a crossroads or an unemployment situation where you need help financially or with family and personal issues. So approaching attitude is very key in starting out your crossroads journey. And too often I see people starting out on step 4. We'll go back. Step 4 again is searching. They haven't even approached the planning of the work. They've gone immediately to searching. It's like, okay, I know what I want to do. And maybe some people do. Maybe you've already done that and you have a good handle on it. But sometimes people really need to take stock in what they're doing, especially with the attitude, especially with how are you approaching this job search. The second step is aptitude. Excuse me. Aptitude is discovering and developing your strengths. This is where some real introspective work is done. Okay, there's 5 factors in your unique design. Okay, what we call the equation of gifts is your background, your abilities, and personality. Background is your life history. It's your experiences. It's your education. Your abilities are what do you do best. It's your talents, your knowledge, your skills. And of course, your personality is how you do what you do. It's your natural behavior. And equated together, all those things we call our gifts. Well, then there's also your passions. What are your interests? What do you like to do? What do you enjoy doing? And of course, then what do you value? What's most important to you? What is your purpose? Or is there a cause that you're passionate about? So those 5 factors kind of make up your unique design. Okay, we just talked in Ephesians 2:10. God said He created each one of us uniquely. Okay, His unique design, His masterpiece. Each one of us is different in a certain way, but none of us is exactly the same in any one of those characteristics. But what is different here, as you approach the crossroads stakes, is there's an X factor that belongs up there that we don't consider. And with all due respect to Workforce Development Center and other career resources, they don't factor on this. The spiritual aspect of things, the X factor is the presence of Christ in your life. How is that affecting you and the way you approach your job search? And 2 Corinthians says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. The old things are passed away. Behold, new things have come. The X factor is the active presence of Jesus Christ in your life. And that presence, that X factor, ignites spiritual gifts. It turns these factors, these designs, into gifting. And that allows you to understand and utilize these things in a way that you probably didn't think of before. Now, discovering your strengths, what we do in this step 2, there's several different ways of doing it. There's self-assessments. Who knows what a STAR story is? Anybody? Kim? Yeah, good job.
Well, it's your situation and then you're going to tell about it and your action you took and the end result.
Right. A STAR story, and these are things that are actually part of a resume as well. STAR stories are, what was the situation? What was the task that I engaged in? What actions did I take? And what was the result? So you do a variety of self-assessments in this. So you're introspectively looking at the history of your work, what you've done, your volunteer roles, your other activities. So you're doing self-assessments. Okay, you also do reference assessments. You're asking your friends, your coworkers, family, people who you've gone to school with, and asking them for personal references as well. Then one of the unique things about this ministry as well is some of the computerized professional type of assessments. 2 of them that the Crossroads recommends and offers are, one is My Place. It's an assessment tool. We haven't used this yet in our ministry, but we also use and highly recommend Career Direct through the Crown Financial Ministry. This is my report. Look at that. That's huge. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour online going through this, but this is part of the class that you would go through. This class includes the fee to take this assessment. What this does is this systematically and through years and years of history identifies those things, those factors, your unique design, and puts it in a format that allows you to take a look at it and say, yeah, that's me. And that's how I can approach going to the next step of my employment. So it looks at your background, your abilities, your personality, your interests and values, and it actually puts it out there. So with the combination of those 3 things, we're looking at what are our strengths? Who are we? How did God make us? Okay, so we're looking at self-assessment, reference assessments, and professional assessments. And we take all of those and we look at them and say, okay, what are the key words? Summarize your strengths. Look at your background, your abilities, your interests, your personality, your values, your spiritual gifts, any blind spots or weaknesses you might have based on all of those. And looking at all of those, looking at key words that come up over and over again in any one of those assessments. And by doing that, you can identify what your unique strengths are. And that's the summary of step 2 is aptitude. Okay, so we started with attitude. We've gone to aptitude. And now they meet together at altitude. That's the 3rd step. Target opportunities and resume. You see the little diagram there is kind of a target. It looks like a gun sight. Now that's politically incorrect nowadays, but that's what it is. It's a target, okay? You're targeting your opportunities, and on that target you have to factor in things like your occupation, the work you do, the job functions. What kind of occupation do you want to have? Okay? The industry. Who do you want to work for? What kind of employers? What do they do? I mean, do they manufacture things? Do they provide a service? What is it that you're interested in then? The location. Where are you located? Do you want to stay here in this area? Do you want to move states? Do you want to work internationally? The type of income that you're looking for. You have to evaluate, what do I need? What do I want? What do I need? What can I live on? You factor those types of things in. And it's undergirded by the platform and the culture, okay? And what do I mean by that? The platform is the type of employment you're looking for, okay? Do you want to be self-employed? Do you want to be an employee of a company? Do you want to own your own business? Do you want to volunteer? Do you want to be a contractor so that you're not tied to a different, an individual company, but That's what I mean by platform. And the culture is what are the operating values of an organization that you want to be a part of. When you're thinking of the work that you want to be doing, what is the culture? Do they have a value statement or a mission statement that is in coincidence with what you want to do? And in the middle of all that, in the bullseye of your target, are the opportunities. When you put all of that together, you basically looked at, and you can't see this very well, but these are two overlapping circles here, your strengths and their needs. So you've already evaluated in aptitude what your strengths are. You've looked at, your gifts and your passions. So what are your strengths and what are the company's needs? And where they overlap is where you're going to find the sweet spot, if you will. We also talked about in step 3, the altitude is target resumes. What are the resumes that are going to allow you to communicate this information, your strengths matched up with the needs of the company? And it has to be premised on the message. Okay, what can I do for you? That's what a company wants. As a hiring manager, as somebody who's interviewed people and looked for employees, that's what I'm looking for. What can you do for me? And a lot of times we as employment candidates come at it with a backwards viewpoint, saying, okay, what can you do for me, company? What are the benefits? What am I going to get out of doing this job? You have to approach it from the viewpoint of what are you going to be able to offer this company? What can you do? How do your strengths and their needs overlap? And that's what you do with your resume. And you discuss in detail the chronological versus the functional styles. And again, one thing that we covered, and you've probably been told this over and over again, but no white lies, no little bitty, no, it's not entirely true, but most of it's true. No, it's got to be factual. It's got to be the truth, because it's too easy to be found out later on, and these stories do occur. They happen. So, and it's much harder to try to cover up the lies over and over again, because then you have to think of another lie to cover the other lie, and then another one to cover that one, where in reality, if you told the truth in the first place, it would have been an issue. So that's always a major concern when you're talking about resume. Right.
If I can make a point about that.
Sure.
Over time, I've worked with a number of people who are Christians who will ask me, is when going over the resume, or they want to ask me, they'll just mention something, some work function or work functions that are on the resume that aren't entirely true. And they say, well, is that okay? Everybody does it, or I'm really not going to be found out. Whatever the reason is. And there's never a right reason for lying at all on a resume at all. And God, in no way, shape, or form can bless that.
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Because even if the company never finds out, there is somebody that always knows. God Himself knows that you didn't glorify Him in the work that you were doing by doing that, in securing that type of work.
I find if I would work for a company, they don't respect me and the trust between the two, that's a turn off for me, because I've been out in the workforce for a long time, and that's for a long time. But I notice that if they don't respect me for my needs, and it's not within my needs, that's a turn off for me, and I don't feel comfortable working for a company that doesn't respect my needs. And they don't have, if they blame you for something, they don't have proof of that. You have no way to protect you.
Sure. That's a good point. A trusting relationship between an organization and employees is, I think, a huge need for most people. I think it's one of those things that you're looking for in an organization when you're saying, the company that I'm working for has to be a company of good repute. And the trust relationship has to work both ways. I agree. So at this point, we've planned the work. We've gone through attitude, aptitude, we've met at altitude, and now we're going to start working the plan. So step 4 is the searching. We find jobs, careers, and calling. The interesting thing, the way we approach this is with a couple eyeballs. One eye is for looking, the other guy is for seeing. What do I mean by that? Well, one eye, you're looking for all the opportunities. You're starting to search. You're starting to use all that information that you've just compiled, and you're looking for the jobs. The other eye is for seeing, and that seeing is to see what God's calling is there for you. Okay, and that's the interesting thing. Is one eye is for looking according to your plan. The other eye is seeing God as God directs it. So the looking versus seeing is what you are intending on doing. And the other one is for seeing what God really wants you to be doing. And the closer you can match those two eyeballs up to focus on your opportunity, that's the way you want to do it. We approach this by all the time praying. All the time praying. There's several scriptures that I can go into here. Be joyful always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be open for you. These are key pieces of scripture that identify why we have to offer this up in prayer. And this is the difference between this type of ministry and job searching technique and process than you'll see at a career development center. No offense to them. This is where it really comes into play. Barb?
If you had asked me last month if I'd be in a different position in my company, I would have told you, I don't think so. But when it comes to the Lord directing your steps and He's having you a way to walk, in the program that I work in with the healthcare field, a new manager came in and he was telling the direction that the program that I worked in for 10 years was going to be going. And I said, I don't think that's going to work for me. Is there another opening over at this other program? I believe God gave those words. And he said, yes, they're hiring now. They're taking, at that program, they're taking interviews, but you'll have to apply to work there. And I did, and here I am now working in this other program. And I just am praising and thanking God because He gave me a holy boldness with this new manager. Because you meet a new manager and you say, well, I'd like to work in another program. It could come down against you.
Yeah.
But I found favor, and I'm just as happy as can be that God put that in my mind at that moment to ask if there was an opening in that other program, and that it went so quickly.
Thanks for sharing.
It's a praise report.
Thank you. And that's a prime example. That's an illustration of what I mean by one eye looking, one eye seeing. Barb was open to what God was presenting her, and she was seeing what He had in store for her. The other way that we approach this is on-the-ground networking. Kara from Workforce Development Center mentioned networking. Networking is the way you find your job. I found my job via networking. I didn't apply to a job online. I didn't find it on a search engine. Somebody contacted me, and we developed a network. It was a recruiter, but it's a network. It's the way it works. And there's ways to do this, and it's documented. There's studies, there's data that says 85% of the jobs that are found via networking. You know, if you're looking in the want ads in the Sunday paper, you're not going to find that job. You might 5 or 6% of the time, but you know, personal referrals. That's another aspect of the networking aspect. 42 times more effective by getting a job through a personal referral, because people put their reputation on the line if they're going to personally refer you. There's going to be a higher degree of success in securing that job if you've got a personal referral going into that networking opportunity. Family, friends, schoolmates, recruiters, careers, job fairs. There's tons of ways of networking people. When you network, you think of the people. The raw material of your network is people you know, and it's not just work colleagues. It's family, it's friends, it's the barber that cuts my hair, it's the people that check me out at the grocery store that I see every Sunday night at 10 o'clock when my wife sends me out to the grocery store. Also, networking includes your elevator pitch, personal business cards. Those are the tools of networking with people. Your elevator pitch is your short, concise, memorized statement of who you are, what you've done, what you're looking for. And they say an elevator pitch because it's something that you could conceivably say at the time the elevator moves from one floor to the next, where you can concisely communicate that in an attempt to initiate a networking opportunity with somebody. Business cards or personal cards that you're able to concretely give to somebody and say, if you know of somebody that's looking for that type of position that I could fill, here's my information. Online searching. This is where we get into a little bit of discussion about, well, how do we do that? Well, it started out with the internet on researching companies, looking at their job sites, looking at their websites and their search engines, looking at Monster, things of that nature. Well, now it's expanded to all the social networking sites, and had Katie Felton been here tonight, she could have spoke to these types of social media and how they can apply to the job searching technique. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter are three big ones out there right now. Facebook is actually the third largest country in the world. I don't know if you know that. There's like 600 million people on Facebook. There's only a couple countries larger than that. I think it's China and Indonesia are the only couple countries larger than Facebook. So everybody's on Facebook right now. LinkedIn is a more professional version of Facebook. It's your professional way of networking, or not networking. Strike that because that's not right. LinkedIn is not networking, it's managing your network. Your network, again, is your contacts. LinkedIn is a way of managing that, okay? Twitter is the same way. Twitter is a social media opportunity for you to connect with others and finding the different opportunities that might exist. Posting your resume, that's another opportunity too. Posting your resume on search engines like Monster or things of that nature. Developing a search engine on one of those major types of job search websites are another opportunity. I caution people who are currently employed, like I was, that you don't necessarily want to do that unless you want to really leave the company quickly, because they'll find that out. I mean, skilled HR professionals nowadays are using these tools. They're on these websites. They're networking with people, and they're likely to find this out. Someone came to me at my last job and told me that several of the people working for you are looking for jobs. I said, well, how do you know that? They said, well, we placed a bunch of blind ads and several of them applied for them. So you have to be careful with online posting. Unless, of course, you are in an unemployed status where, the world is your ocean. You've got to contact as many people as you can and develop those networking relationships. But when you're employed, you have to be careful. You have to be careful. That's the one word there. So searching is step 4. Sorting is wowing your interviews and employers. The wow interview process, which is a process that we talked about in the class. Let me just refer to it here. It says, Jay Litton, the creator of the wow interview process, says it's as simple as PPQ. Be the most prepared, be the most passionate, and also be qualified to do the job. Okay? When you approach the interview process, be prepared. Okay? There's the steps of engaging interviews that we'll talk about here. But when you're preparing for an interview, know something about the company. Do your research. Prepare yourself. Prepare to answer standard types of questions. Have questions prepared about the company. Show that you are interested in that and that you're passionate about being able to satisfy their needs. And we talked about that earlier. You have to approach it from the viewpoint of, what can I do for you? How can I solve your problems? And that's what the company is looking for. And also be qualified. Make sure you're approaching an opportunity that you're qualified to do. If you're like me and been in manufacturing in operations your entire career, you're not going to go looking for a vice president of sales position. Because that's not my experience. That's not what I'm qualified to do. So you have to approach it, of course, from the viewpoint that you're qualified to do what you're attempting to seek out. It doesn't mean that you can't change careers. It just means you have to be qualified, or at least indicate that there's a process involved, that you know what you're doing. There's different types of interviews that we talk about: behavioral, the screening, the hiring manager. The behavioral is an interesting type of interview. I went through with a company I worked with, or was interviewing for several months ago. It's hard to prepare for those type of things, other than knowing the general types of questions that might be asked. Because what they'll do is they'll say, okay, you're in this situation, how do you react? Or give me a situation where you had to deal with this type of problem. And it's focused on how do you behave in the workplace, rather than just spouting off the things that you've succeeded in, or the type of work that you want to do. The 4 steps to engaging interviews: pray, prepare, perform, and praise. We start out with prayer, okay? And again, if you haven't got this from my talk already, that it revolves around an approach to this job search by submission to God. You have to pray and depend on Him to provide for you. Prepare. Be anxious for nothing. Philippians 4, 6, and 7. That was the verse I wanted to just say. Be anxious for nothing, be prepared. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding, should guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So there's this comfort, there's this. It's easy to be nervous about things, and things that you don't have control over. But by preparing and going to God in prayer, I think that will help you to engage in the interview. Perform. No unwholesome word. I like that aspect, because that focuses on our attitude as well. How many of you are asked to talk about your previous employer where things didn't go so well? How do you answer those kind of questions without being negative? That's what it means with no unwholesome word. When you're willing and apt to start talking negatively about a previous employer, the person you're interviewing with is going to really question, well, geez, what are they going to say about us if we hire them and things don't go their way? And are they going to become a disgruntled employer? Are they going to be one of the cancers that infect the rest of the organization? So you have to approach things, again, from a proper attitude adjustment. Then praise, and everything give thanks. Even if things don't work out, even if, I can't tell you the number of interviews I had before I got my new job, many of which I thought went very well, and I thought, this is it. This is going to be where I end up. Now you get a call when you're on vacation. Sorry, you didn't get the job. They give it to the other guy. But in all things, you got to give praise to God. You had the opportunity. You got a good experience of doing it. You met some good people. You networked with other people. You don't know, that person you interviewed for, even though you're not working for that company, might be the networking contact that gets you your next opportunity. You don't know that. Only God knows. But in everything, give praise, because it works out the way He wants it. And then finally, when you're talking interviewing, dressing for success. We look at it in 3 different aspects: spiritually, mentally, and physically. Okay? Spiritually is putting on the full armor of God. Ephesians chapter 6 talks about the full armor of God and dealing with the enemy in all the way he approaches all of us here. And mentally, connecting your strengths to their needs. Mentally, you have to be prepared on how you're going to approach this interview and convince them that I'm the one that can solve your problems because, you know, my strengths are going to meet your needs. And that's exactly what happened in the job that I just secured. And I'll talk more about it next month when I give my testimony. But finally, physically, in the Dress for Success, you know, look the part. Don't come in there looking disheveled or in a manner that would reflect badly on the company if you were an employee. Think of it in terms of how would I represent this employee by the way I appear, by the way I conduct myself, how I greet the receptionist when I come in. So that's what we talk about, sorting. Finally, selecting. Walk in the work made for you, okay? Get and make offers. When we talk about that, let's see, because I'm running a little behind. Let's go to the evaluate the offers. You get an offer, and this was a situation that I just went through with the offer that I got. My wife and I had gone through the offer and had looked at it and all of this. There's a very nice tool in the workbook here, the understanding the offer exercise, and this is another form that's available on the website at crossroadscareer.org, where you can identify what your needs or requirements are and how do you match those up with the offer itself. Through prayer, through counsel, analytical decision, looking at this and praying. My wife and I prayed about it because there were some differences. There were some changes that were going to be different from where I currently was. Understanding the full opportunity. It's not just a salary and the benefits. There's a lot of different opportunities that go into an offer from a company that you have to understand. Is there some long-term stability there? Is there growth? Is there educational opportunities that don't present themselves in your current situation? And look for a win-win negotiation. The company's not just going to give you whatever you want. They're going to want something out of it as well. They're going to want to say, well, okay, what do we get? What do we get out of that for meeting you this way? And again, looking at it as God's calling. Is He calling you to this position? Is He calling you to be here beyond just the offer itself? The one thing that I'd like to close on here with the selecting part is, you'll see it on your worksheet, your master worksheet there, under selecting. It says, prepare for your next crossing, JOB. You're probably wondering, what does that mean? Well, let me find it in the book and I will explain it to you. All right, there it is. It says, learn that job success is actually in the word job. J-O-B, joy is for the joy of your job. O is for obedience, and B is for doing your best. Be a good steward of whatever God gives you. Don't worry about what He doesn't give you, because you don't have any responsibility for what He doesn't give you. Remember that you are God's. Okay? So in that, there's the joy, the obedience, and doing your best. That's what it means by preparing for your next crossing. Because unless you're nearing retirement age, the job that you find next to the one that you're in right now is probably not the last job you'll have. So you'll go through this again. You'll go through this step, this process again. So the tools that you've uncovered here are going to be useful for you the next time you go through this process. And you can build on that the next time. And finally, just a brief advertisement on the program itself. Again, you can log on to crossroadscareer.org. You can register, and on the back of our agenda, it gives you the key to register. The membership key is JER2911. You can register as a career explorer on their website. But even before you do that, you can download the 80-page guide that I showed you here. This can be kind of a work tool for you to work through. But I encourage you, if my discussion tonight has spurred some interest, I'd encourage you to sign up for the class that Craig's going to offer in May, because it's very worthwhile, especially going through with a group. I think it's very beneficial. So with that, I'm going to skip the questions because I'm going to be available in the second part of the meeting if you've got any questions on this in detail. And I thank you for your time and attention.